My drive and passion to help girls come from when I was still very young, maybe around 8 years old. I knew that my grandmother is a teen mother, so she had her first child when she was 14, and then that aunt also had her first child at the age of 17. So it's a spark in me to think that do really girls need to be moms at a very young age?
School-based sexual and reproductive health education is one of the most important ways to help adolescents recognize and avoid the risks and improve their reproductive health. Education provides a critical opportunity for young people to learn about bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Comprehensive Sexuality Education, or CSE, is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality, going beyond the narrower approaches of the past.
In terms of comprehensive sexuality education, which is the theme that we're advocating for in education, we are providing the space and we're facilitating access for young people, for young advocates to commit their governments, their own local leaders in these conversations. We're also creating a space for people to be actively engaging in all of this and all of the topics that are also discussed within this great and big thing that is comprehensive sexuality education.
Successful CSE programs cover learning on values, attitudes, and social norms, interpersonal and relationship skills, gender equality, sexual and gender-based violence, and sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR. Joanna Heret is a specialist in sexuality education at UNESCO.
CSE is really important because it can teach children and young people to learn to treat each other with respect and dignity from an early age. But it also means that children and young people will know who to trust and to consult when they're confused about their bodies or about relationships or the things that they're hearing in the media.
According to the World Health Organization, early pregnancy and childbirth are the leading cause of death for 15 to 19-year-old girls worldwide. Approximately 16 million girls aged 15 to 19 and 2.5 million girls under 16 give birth in regions of the global south each year. About 3.9 million girls aged 15 to 19 undergo unsafe abortions.
So young people will learn what's right and safe for them and how to avoid coercion, how to prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. And it will also really help to promote gender equality, which is a really critical issue for all of us in all of our societies.
Sexual and reproductive rights, human rights, education, all of these conversations and discussions tend to happen in isolation. And what I mean is that we're not connecting to other things that are intersecting in one person's lives. So when we're speaking about education, it's also important to know in the context of everyone's life, what's the importance of education.
Sheena Hadi is the executive director of AHANG, an NGO working in sexual and reproductive health and rights in Pakistan.
Comprehensive sexuality education can be seen as a foundation. So the way that I view it is a set of building blocks that can be given to young people that provides them with accurate information and better knowledge, and alongside that with the skills that they need to lead a safer life, to make better decisions about their reproductive lives, and very importantly, to have positive sexuality.
Ola Alua Abogan is a lawyer, women's rights activist, and founder of the Nigerian NGO Girl Pride Circle.
I think that it's important for girls and young women to have access to accurate information about their sexuality and to be able to stand for their sexual and reproductive health and rights, because it influences a whole lot of other dimensions of their life, their economic rights, their ability to make decisions, their health. Everything is tied to SRHR as a central part of human rights of women and girls in particular.
Clearly, there are many obstacles to effective implementation of CSE, even when a national curriculum is in place. How can these barriers be overcome?
The major barrier to sexuality education, I think, is actually quite similar the world over. So in speaking to other specialists and other organizations and people working on sexuality education, whatever the context is, it tends to be that the barrier is about adults having discomfort about giving information to young people because of the fear that it will result in unsafe sexual practices. Whereas we know from data and we know from research that this is actually the opposite, that young people who have better knowledge, have information, and have soft skills to practice that information actually tend to be safer in their behaviors. So the major barriers are actually coming from myths and misconceptions.
There's another challenge which is more practical, which is just making sure that teachers are really well equipped and confident to be able to teach these subjects. Many of us feel naturally a little bit cautious when we talk about our bodies or about relationships. And so sometimes it's easier just to package those messages in the biology lesson, for example, and just talk about reproduction in an abstract way. But it is important to make sure that we talk about relationships and we give young people the opportunity in the classroom for discussion and to ask questions which may be in their minds.
Gender equality in education should be cross-cut in all platforms, both formal and non-formal, and how it should be normalized in the next 20 years so that sexuality education is not merely just a subject, but a way of life, but a part of our education systems.
And so we can only make sure that those questions are well responded to if we make sure that teachers themselves have the information which they need, but also the confidence and the wherewithal to be able to deal with those more sensitive discussions in a healthy and open way in the classroom.
I think it is absolutely possible to overcome the barriers to comprehensive sexuality education. A lot of those barriers are coming because there is an assumption about what the content is. And so if there's very honest, open communication, if there's a lot of transparency about what young people are being taught, and there's trust that is built, I think that opens the gateways to be able to have key stakeholders, particularly parents, understand that the content is supposed to help, not harm. And oftentimes what we find is that when we have that open dialogue with parents, they actually come to appreciate that many of the issues that we are tackling are real challenges and real problems that they have been too frightened to address with their children themselves.
So that dialogue between the people who are developing curricula and who are delivering CSE in schools with the communities and parents is a really, really important part of making sure that CSE can be delivered well, that meets the needs of young people.
So what approaches have worked?
AHUNG has been working with schools for over a decade on the integration of life skills-based education, which is the terminology we use to refer to comprehensive sexuality education in Pakistan. And through our education programs, we have been equipping schools with content that is locally developed and specific to local needs. We have also been training teachers, and we've been adapting and amending policies in schools to make them more SRHR friendly.
Girl Pride Circle contributes to sexuality education for Nigerian adolescent girls through after-school education clubs and community workshops. So we have education clubs across several schools in Nigeria, southwestern Nigeria, for adolescent girls, where they learn about sexual and reproductive health, gender-based violence. They get information about how their body works because they are in a critical stage in adolescence, and they need to understand that these changes are natural. It is a critical stage as well where they need to gain full autonomy and power over their bodies and over decisions regarding their sexuality.
When we self-actualize, especially for adolescent girls and women, we assert our rights, not only for our bodies, but for our future. And I think that's the strong suit of focusing on SRHR, especially on sexuality education, because we empower girls and women to decide about their bodies and their lives. However, the pushback still is how the Philippines is seen as a conservative country, but apparently we're not. We are just expected to be conservative. But this conservative ideas is being shaped now by young people. As such, adolescents are at the forefront of talking about their rights and their needs, especially on reproductive health.
We don't want to be the final experts on all of these matters. We just want to have this platform for all of the experts and all of the young people who know their lives better to gain more funding, to have more opportunities.
Even before the COVID-19 crisis, girls and young women face significant barriers in accessing essential SRHR services. Now, in the midst of this pandemic, school closures and community lockdown have led to a shadow pandemic of gender-based violence, with increased rates of domestic and sexual abuse, early marriage and pregnancy.
COVID will definitely leave a huge and negative impact in a lot of people in terms of exercising their bodily autonomy, because of sexual and reproductive health services not considering as essential, because youth and adolescents and children are not able to go to school, they're being left out. And coming back to the conversation on internet access that we had at the beginning, internet and access to social media even, it's a matter of public discussion now. It should be on our political agendas.
In the next 20 years, I hope this is the new normal. Not the pandemic, not girls being harassed at schools, not girls being discriminated at schools, but the new normal of girls and women being in this spaces where transformative education is happening.
Discussion today on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. My name is Aminata Wari, and I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, commonly known as Ottawa, which is the capital city of Canada. This week and today, we are all tuned in to the Educate for Equality Ungai 20 Forum to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Girl Education Initiative Ungai, as well as we're also celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action with the launch of the Generation Equality Forums. So this is really an opportunity for us to take stock of the past 25 and 20 years and recommit to realizing gender equality and the empowerment for women and girls, especially now as COVID-19 pandemic threatens to undo many gains on gender equality that we've seen over the past 25 years. We know and we've seen, and this video has also shown some stark statistics that according to the World Health Organization, early pregnancy and childbirth are the leading cause of deaths for 15 to 19-year-old girls worldwide, with approximately 16 million girls aged 15 to 19 giving birth in regions of the global south each year, and about 3.9 million girls aged 15 to 19 undergoing unsafe abortions. Those statistics really stood out to me as we watched the video. And we know that the pandemic has further exacerbated gender inequalities as well as these conditions, especially with the restricted access to sexual and reproductive health, SRH services, as well as school closures in which a lot of programs like CSE as well as food subsidies are provided. So today we're really going to unpack these issues with a group of amazing experts that are young and in the field, working directly with youth. We'll also discuss a way forward for universal access to comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE. However, it's really important that when we do have these conversations within our communities, that it's intergenerational, and that we also have cross-sectorial buy-in, especially buy-in from the government, because that's important in maintaining and implementing CSE programs. So with all that said, I'd like to introduce the experts, our friends here today, to join. I will have a discussion for the next 40 minutes, and then we'll end with a nice video. So we first have Manak, who is the Executive Director of the YP Foundation in India. Welcome, Manak. Solange is the National Coordinator of the Senegal Right Here, Right Now platform. Daniela, who is a woman delivery young leader and a medical doctor in Ecuador. And Remy, who is the Regional Officer for the Education for Health and Wellbeing Program at the UNESCO Regional Office for Southern Africa. Thank you all for coming here, for being here this morning. And we're going to jump right into the discussion. So as was said in the video, and as we know, CSE, or life skills-based education, is typically delivered in a classroom setting. This session today, we're talking about bodily autonomy and SRHR. Why is there a need to shift from an exclusive focus on academic outcomes to a more holistic approach that recognizes the way education shapes every aspect of learners' self-development and growth? So we'll start with you, Remy, please. And then
thank you very much, Minata, for that introduction and for really laying the ground for our chat this afternoon here from Johannesburg. I think it's important for us to begin looking at shifting from exclusively looking only at academic outcomes, because I think the purpose of education is continuously changing. From just preparing young people for the job market, whether it's in accounting or medicine, to looking at how do young people position themselves to contribute to this global village with complex problems and complex realities. The fact that we're looking at gender-based violence being on the increase in many communities, HIV, SRHR, placing young people at a center stage. And the future really depends on the fact that we should be able to invest in these young people. And so for me, a holistic view is more than just looking at academics. It's also looking at, whether or not young people are able to access education as a whole in a friendly and safe environment. How many times did they seek help and be able to get it with their emotional well-being, with their mental health? That's just beyond, what they learn in the classroom. I also think that in terms of girls' education, especially, if we're able to give them a holistic access to, life skills education about relationships, about, gender and gender equality and the complexities of the world that they live in, then they will be able to contribute better and more in their societies, in their communities where they're leaders or decision making, or they want to go into politics and so on. The UNESCO's joint report with Plan International and the government of France, Beijing +25 Generation Equality, which was launched just this week, really demonstrates the fact that CSE is critical, and it's one of the key levers to action to be able to achieve the Beijing agenda. And 25 years later, I think that we need to now look more and more at what kind of education are we giving the girl child, what kind of education are we giving young people, and does that prepare them to be able to take center position in the national and regional and global matters?
Perfect. Thanks for sharing, Remy. And I know, Manak, India is it's constantly going through a great revolution, but can you tell us what's happening there and what shift you are seeing?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me in the conversation. I'm Manak. I'm based in New Delhi, in India. And I think in this day and age, there is actually ample evidence to show the importance of not just academic, but holistic outcomes in school programs. And sitting in New Delhi, actually, in the last few years, we have seen great examples of work done in government schools in New Delhi, where they have implemented things like a happiness curriculum, that actually have led to great results and made education that much more exciting and enticing almost for children in schools. I think exactly like Remy was saying, the whole focus of education with additional components of skill building, of moving people towards the job market, continuously asks young people the question of what do you want to be when you grow up. Like, what do you want to be is the only question that is asked. I think a lot of these holistic components, such as comprehensive sexuality education, encourage young people to ask themselves who they want to be. What kind of person do they want to be? Where are they in the world right now? And what kind of world they want to create? And I think unless we gear education to ask many more of such, self-reflective and identity-oriented questions, we will not create leaders. We will only create skilled workers. And I think that is why it is very important to move from academic to more holistic identity and more real world outcomes is what I would call them actually. So that's what I would say to this.
Thank you both, and you touched on really key points that CSC is really this building block and foundation for young people to be who they want to be beyond just skilled workers. And I'm really interested to learn more about this happiness curricula in India because I think it's really needed. So as we've seen in the video as well, that CSE is really this foundation and building block, but a lot of young people are usually not engaged in the decision-making process or the planning and design, which sometimes can lead to curriculums or modules that don't really reflect or resonate with them. So what is the value of including youth in CSE curricula development, implementation, as well as the monitoring? And how can we do this in a meaningful way? Daniela, over to you.
Thank you. So I've worked before with young people, and they all have a voice. They all have a saying in this matter, and they want to be included because they feel that sometimes the curriculums do not represent their needs. It's hard for them. Sometimes you remember when you were young and you were afraid to ask certain questions to the teacher or to your doctor or even to your parents. So we need to include those uncomfortable topics in the situation in order to make a more wide curriculum, and they could feel that their questions are being answered. We might think that since they don't know about these things, they cannot really have an opinion on the development of curriculums, but it's not quite right. Now that we have access to information through digital websites and all these digital platforms, and also you have your colleagues or your peers that are telling you certain things, you do have your certain doubts and you want to be involved. How to meaningfully engage them? It's sitting them in the table where these matters are happening, inviting them to contribute to the things that they want to talk about. Not only give them the information that we think that it's needed, but also you can have certain focus group discussions, for instance, and include young people from different ages in what do you want to learn? How do you want to learn? Not only the information, but how do you want to receive it? It's tricky now with the whole COVID situation because having these type of meetings might be a little bit harder, but we can also see it as a opportunity, for instance, to create online meetings with them and seating them, making them feel important and that they are being heard. Also, I think it's important now to give the focus only to the curriculum during the educational programs in schools, but also switch this and making a more collaborative situation with other institutions, for instance, and making them see that their opinion does matter.
Perfect, thank you. Solange, over to you.
Thank you, Aminata. So for us here in Senegal, we used to say, the young people, what they used to say to others when they need them is nothing for us without that. This curriculum will be for young people. So implementing it without involving them will just make us having delays in really having young people understanding and also adults. So we need to have young people being involved at all levels, while setting, while reflecting, while writing down and implementing, so that we can ensure that the main concerners are really involved, that they can give their opinions, and also that they can share the information with their peer. So social media and all the other platforms that we have, because this is all about young people. So we cannot do it without involving young people, and we need to advocate, and we need to make the government and other CSOs and all the actors that are working around these issues, we need to make them understand that it is important to have young people in board in order to achieve the goal that we would like to achieve regarding the CSC.
I like that. For us, without us, it's really key. And Daniela, you touched on a point in terms of having it being age appropriate or have youths from different age points. And I think that's super important in terms of CSC curriculums development. So it'd be great to also hear from you, Manak and Remy, of how do we meaningfully include young people in the development, implementation, and monitoring of this curriculum?
Thanks so much, Aminata. I agree really with Daniela and Solange. I think that, when they were talking, just reminded me of a time when I went into this meeting, a youth meeting, then I hadn't aged out officially. And there were young people younger than me in that space who were saying things that I couldn't understand. And, I thought I was young enough to know, but I learned so much in that space, and it actually made me realize that maybe I have aged out. I think it's necessary to reach out to groups, networks, organizations that are working with young people at the grassroots, to be able to speak to them and hear how they want comprehensive sexuality education to be packaged, to be measured, to be monitored, and to be delivered to them. I also know that, more and more we're having young people being service providers. So whether it's in the health services provision as doctors, or teachers or community leaders. So we can't avoid getting the voices of the young people in decision-making around CSC. Precisely what we've heard in this region in sub-Saharan Africa really calls from young people more and more, telling us, look, we know that if we read these documents, they say there's CSC being provided in country X and Y, but we know as young people that we're not comfortable in some of what is called CSC. Can you bring us to the table? So I do think that there are organizations that are existing, organizations that are already well structured and networks, but we must think also beyond those and look at, the young people that we can't find on social media, we can find, on the internet, and be able to source their views as well.
I think, just to take off from where Remy left right now, I think one of the problems is that we continue to look at young people as communities whose problems we have to solve. So the entire approach of programming and working with young people is that let us go and solve their problems for them. And I think the shift of lens that we really need to be able to comprehensively and meaningfully involve young people across is to actually build an accountability to young people. I think that is what goes missing in a lot of approaches of working with young people, particularly the larger the space gets. So government programs, for example, are always solving problems. They are not, becoming accountable to those to whom they are delivering a service or information. And I think that's the kind of shift that will help us get from a space right now where engagement of young people at all of these levels that you're outlining is only dependent on the intention of the person who's running the show. And there is no actually organized structure or system that ensures that a young person will be included and the thing cannot move further without having that young person in that decision-making space. And I think that's the aspiration that all of us in the youth organizations, I think, over here work with. That there will be systematic, structured ways and systems that will not allow movement till young people are meaningfully included. And I think that's the changes that is required here.
That's really important, and we have to see young people beyond passive recipients, right? They were actors, they were actors. And with that, we always hear about the pushback, and there's steps to get through gatekeepers, right, in order to roll out CSE curriculum. So in general, what are the reasons that you're seeing in your communities or the work that you do? What's the reason for reluctance to integrate CSE or a life skills-based curricula into national programs, and how can they be overcome? We'll start with you, Solange.
Thank you, Aminata. So I think that the main reason the first one can be considered as the social norms, the culture, the fact that we have very restrictive social norms around sexuality, the fact that people have some wrong ideas, some wrong information regarding CSE, because they always consider it as a way of making young people, a way of urging them to have sex earlier. And also the other reason can be considered as parents that don't always want the children to be tough this subject. They just don't want this subject to be tough at school, because for them this is not a good way. This is a way of urging libertinage. And also the that are not always willing to teach this subject, that are not always feeling comfortable with talking about all around sexuality at school. They are blocking some of the process for having CSE being in the curriculum. And also in the other way, we have the politicians that are not always being respecting their engagement, that they have taken at regional or international level, that are not always taking also their responsibility because of the culture, because of the population, because of some opposition within the society. So they're afraid of the elections, the votes, and they most of the time prefer just not to take their responsibility and make the best choice for the society. So for me, those are some of the reasons that are still being barriers for us to have the CSE being implemented in the country.
And I think if to add to this, I think of course we all know, and we've been dealing with this whole taboo around sexuality. That is the biggest reason why comprehensive sexuality education, life skills-based education, does not make it into national or school curricula. And despite the fact that there is so much sexualization, so much sexual imagery and sexual content around us and around young people on all these devices that they now have access to, which is definitely not a bad thing, we still shy away from providing more organized and comprehensive information, even in that context, which is continuously baffling to all of us who work in this field. And I think it's a result of two things, this taboo. One is, I think, this complete lack of trust and faith in young people's ability to process information, to make aware, responsible, and autonomous decisions about their own life. It is still this same kind of protectionist approach that we will come to you and we will solve your problems and tell you what to do, instead of enabling you to be able to actually take your own decisions in the best way that you can do. I think that feudal approach to child raising in many of our communities, where it is my child and I will decide what this child will do, from education to marriage to relationships and jobs. I think that is what really keeps. And we've realized actually that when you start engaging with parents, you start having that conversation, and many parents are actually very easily open to the idea that children should learn more about themselves, their own lives, and their health and their sexual lives. But like Solange was also saying, a lot of times it is not an election, it is not a political agenda. Adolescents and children are not voters. And so that escapes, and political agenda gets overtaken by just mass consciousness around taboo of sexuality. And we also saw in the video how Sheena was talking about how actually correct information leads to making much more responsible and safe decisions by adolescents, but that is not a statistic that we are able to popularize in this current context. And I think that's why it doesn't make international curricula.
Just like to keep it on the same track, I think that, well, we're addressing many barriers when we talk about sexuality. People are afraid to talk about them. But you also have to face the conservative people. So sometimes, like Solange was saying, you have the politicians that don't want these topics to be included because they're afraid of losing votes or to be taken seriously, for instance. And they're also here in Ecuador, for instance, they wanted to include CSE curriculum in schools, and parents were crazy. They just wouldn't want their children to learn these things because they have these misconceptions that if you learn more, you want to start earlier your active sexual life, or you'll have a more irresponsible response to this type of information. And it's not true. There are studies that show that the more you know, the later on you will start your sexual life, and you will do it in a more responsible way because you have the information. But they still don't want to learn about these things, and they have this barrier about not wanting to learn, their children to learn, especially the young ones. And well, it's funny because if they want the information to be delivered to them, they will find it anywhere. And you know that right now the access to information, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So we need to switch this type of mind of being a closed-minded and not wanting the young people to learn about these things. And instead of that, making them see the whole possibilities and the positive things that will happen if they learn in earlier stages. It's a little bit difficult to work with people that have been culturally influenced all this time to be a more conservative kind of way. But I think there's a lot of work to do with parents and the whole society.
If I could just jump in after Daniela, I also think that, for me, if I reflect on the opposition in our region in particular, here in Southern Africa, I look at the history of CSC and how it got introduced in most of the countries and the schools, and that was around the time of the onset of HIV pandemic. And so a lot of stakeholders have sort of remained, at focusing on HIV prevention and not realizing the magnitude and the diverse problems that young people now are having to deal with outside HIV. So you're looking at early and unintended pregnancy, you're looking at gender-based violences, you're looking at bullying in schools and in communities. If you look at the Global Education Monitoring Report 2020 and the gender report in particular, it really highlights how CSC is critical to tying and responding to some of these problems of teenage pregnancy, gender-based violence, etc. The second point I wanted to also share, colleagues, is that, and I'm going to put the blame on us who work in this space. I don't think that we have unpacked CSC enough and laid it out bare and open enough to communities and individuals outside our circles. Are we able to talk about CSC without saying the words CSC themselves, so that it's relatable, whether it's in the local language in Zambia or in Malawi or in South Africa, that the parent can be able to understand what it is we're talking about? And you go into the spaces, most of the times you hear a lot of practitioners talking about, oh yeah, young people, yes, they need to learn about sex. But it's more than that, right? And we know that. So we need, I think, more and more to unpack so that we can deal with some of these, the fears, the unfounded fears that parents and communities might have. The last thing also, and what we've seen now that we just, from having some development in Zambia just a few weeks ago, is how the people don't understand what is comprehensive. And what does it mean, comprehensive? So you see on social media, people peddling misinformation that by comprehensive, we're saying, let us teach everything to everyone, regardless of the age. And I think that our job and the job, of stakeholders and the space is to really begin to unpack and say, we're saying comprehensive because we're moving away from just looking at disease focus to looking at body autonomy, to looking at, gender relations, to looking at how you can ask and seek help when you need it, to looking at mental health and well-being. Over.
You may have rocked the boat a bit, Remy, and maybe sparked some fire in some people. Are we doing enough, folks? What can we do more? But honestly, really key points there, and people can respond after to Remy's point, but I think key things that you mentioned is localization, right? So CSE is just the term coined, but how do we ensure that it's translated to communities, that it's beyond sex? And also, Daniela, you touched on something really key in terms of access to information. A big reason of the pushback is a misconception that too much information will lead to sexual activity. However, the internet and other sources provide such misguiding information, whereas you have a curricula that's evidence-based, that works, that talks about respect and relationships and consent, where maybe young people can't have that access through the internet. So it's maybe the argument is we can deliver CSE in a safe space within these classrooms instead of leaving it to young people to figure it out in the internet. But does anyone want to respond quickly to Remy's comment of we're not doing enough, or should we go to the last question? Manak?
Sure. I think Remy made an excellent point. I think one of our strategies for implementing our programs is to be able to find partners who work with young people, but not on sexuality issues. So I think our agenda, the focus of our work needs to not just be on delivering the program on ground to young people, but also expanding the community of organizations and service providers that can actually have this conversation. So my interest is actually, and this is what I keep saying, the new frontier for all of our activism and all of our education work is the family WhatsApp group. I think that's where people need to start talking about, these kinds of issues in a language that is understandable to community members. It is, in the context of India, where we have these arranged quote unquote marriages, the matrimonial websites where people look for alliances. That's where we need to be talking about sexual health. I think that's the level of mainstream that we really should aspire to get CSE to.
I love it and completely agree. The family WhatsApp group is where everything is happening. Solange, I saw you come off mute. Do you also have a comment?
Yes, just on that, I completely agree on the fact that we need to unpack this concept much more, and also to localize it, to think about how to make it more accessible for the local population. Because, for example, for us in Senegal, when we started advocating for having this CSE in the curriculum, they just refused at the beginning. Everyone was just against the government, the CSOs, and also the community leaders. And then when we could organize a meeting with all those actors, we ended up with changing the name without touching to the content. We could shift, and rather than talking about sexuality education, comprehensive sexuality education, we decided to call it education to reproductive health. And we found that most of the actors were feeling much more confident with this concept, this new concept, and that really helped us to move in the advocacy for having the CSE being in the curriculum.
That's a really good point. We've all touched on engaging various stakeholders. So we know that CSE cannot be achieved through the education system alone. What are some promising approaches to achieving cross-sectorial collaboration for CSE? Apologies for that. And the floor is open to anyone. Please jump in.
Okay, so since I work in the healthcare sector, I have seen that sometimes, since people are not getting enough information in the classrooms, they would come with questions to your medical doctor, to your community doctor, and if they don't have the information, that sometimes that happens too, we can give them misinformation or not enough. So I think that one of the focus areas that should work together are education and healthcare. We don't need to focus the educational part only in children or young people, but also in the healthcare professionals that are driving the information to others. So I think that you can work together in collaboration. As someone was saying, there are many young professionals in the healthcare sector. So we should make sure that they have the tools to know this kind of things and how to deliver to young people. And also, I think that that's one thing, and the other one could probably be the religious groups in communities, because they are one of the stakeholders that would be, if you have them on your side to make them understand the importance of accessing to this type of information, they would also be helpful. They won't be like, okay, you cannot deliver this information to our communities because it's not adequate. No, we can shift to make it a more collaborative situation, and that will be beneficial especially for young people.
Just also wanted to add and share an experience. In 2013, we brought together ministries of education and ministries of health for the first time ever to really look at young people's sexual and reproductive health needs, and in particular access to CSC as well as youth-friendly services. I think for me that was a landmark meeting that made them commit to say we're going to try and do A, B, C, and D for the young people in our countries. But the question is, how does that translate into actions for the different stakeholders? So what we do, for instance, at UNESCO during the teacher training, as we are training teachers on comprehensive sexuality education at the community level, at the school level, is to also invite health workers and health providers to be in that room so that they can also see and hear, what the teachers are learning and what they will be teaching the learners. But also there's a different byproduct of that meeting, and that's the relationships that get to be created between the teacher and the health worker. And that makes it even easier for referrals. If a teacher sees that this young person needs a health provider, they're a phone call away, and you've created that relationship already. And likewise, when a young person presents at a clinic, and the teacher needs to come into that space to be able to explain some things, I think it's important that those relationships exist. So we can't just focus on the education sector alone. What we're also doing now is to look at other sectors such as gender, where we know that obviously CSC will benefit the gender space in terms of creating more equitable gender norms, right? We know that the youth sector, the ministries of youth and sport and child development are also very key players. And so we're trying to bring them together so that they can join the health and the education to be able to advance comprehensive sexuality education. Over.
I think just to add to that, I think from my experience in India, we have fairly comprehensive programs that deliver sexual and reproductive health and rights information and services both in and out of school. So since 2014, we've had a national adolescent health program with a dedicated stream for sexual and reproductive health, which doesn't exactly, we keep pushing saying make it more like CSC, but is in itself right now fairly progressive. And that definitely gives us a policy space through which to advocate in communities as well as in institutions to be able to provide this information. And I think that's a great thing to have in a country framework. I think we are launching a new school health program which also has this space inbuilt to do reproductive health, HIV information. Ideally, it should have space for sexual and reproductive health and rights based information. I think that's what we are pushing for. So I think those collaborations have existed in India for some time now. And, all of us who work with those collaborations, I know that UNESCO actually is implementing in one of those states the school health program. With UNFPA, we've been working with, service providers to make service providers more youth-friendly. And exactly like Remy is saying, I think, and other colleagues have said before that, Daniela also said that, I think bringing these sectors together now that we have policy space to do that in India and some intent from these different ministries, I think this is the time for us to really step up our game and be able to just make that collaboration work.
Perfect. And over to you, Solange, for the final word.
Thank you, Aminata. I think we just need to help people understand much more what we mean when we talk about CSC. We need to make them understand that having CSC being well implemented means that that will help us to overcome many issues, those around gender-based violences, those around access to sources and information, SRHR, sexual issues around human rights. So because lack of access to CSC is one of the root cause of all these problems that we are facing currently. And the other thing is that we really need to have everyone on board regarding this issue. We need to have no one left behind in order to really overcome this issue, so that we can ensure that once we are not solving the problem partly, but we are solving it entirely. We need to involve in school and out of school. We need to involve the whole society, adults, young people. Everyone needs to be on board so that we can ensure that really the problem is just solved entirely and not partly.
Perfect. Thank you all for such a rich and engaging discussion. I've taken notes. Before we wrap up, just a final quick word from all of you. What's your key takeaway? What's your key message as we strive to achieve Agenda 2030, celebrate Beijing Plus 25? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see CSE?
I just want to wrap it up by saying we're not doing enough. What Remy said really got me thinking, and let's all think about it a little bit more. What can we do? We're talking about the problem, but let's talk about solutions. Let's make it a youth-friendly situation, and let's shift it to make it better for everyone. We have to do enough for them. We're working for young people, so let's include them on the table and make them work with us as well.
Remy?
Thanks. It's sad that we're ending now. I was enjoying this conversation. I think my last sentence would be really to parents, and I hope the parents watching. I'm a parent myself, and I sort of understand the value of having an informed child. Right? I think that the world is really changing, and it's becoming more difficult to live in, more complex, and the more informed, the better placed a child is to make better and progressive decisions. If I look at how I was raised to where I am today, there are questions that I could never ask my parents, which I'm getting asked now by my daughter, how the world was created. At 4 years old, she is asking, where did God come from? Questions that we were told not to ask adults when we were growing up. So because these things are changing and young people are demanding more, they want to learn more to be better empowered. What we can do is to create safe space and enable them to find out more, and also to pass on positive messages to peers.
Thank you, Remy. Solange and Manak, a quick 20 seconds.
Yeah, for me, it's just nothing for us without us. We cannot move through this problem without involving young people at all levels, decision-making and also implementing process. And we also need to have all actors on board in order to ensure that this is going to be solved entirely. Thank you.
I think for me, very quickly, just two things that I want to aspire for. One is the fuller impact of CSE to transform young people's lives and communities be acknowledged in policy, and CSE to reach the family WhatsApp group. Like I said before, those are my two aspirations.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all for joining us. Please stay tuned at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's another great session on feminist action for climate justice. Have a good day, everyone, and enjoy this fun and very relatable video that is coming up right now about families' first experience with CSE. Thank you.
The first thing I can remember was at junior school. I must have been about 9 or 10, and they showed us on those old-fashioned, you know, the big TV screens they had. And we all sat there and watched a woman having a baby. And I was completely traumatised, and it was just a complete bloodbath and a mess. And I just walked out there going, ugh, and I went home so confused.
When I reached my puberty age, I couldn't tell my mother, because there is no that kind of relationship there. I rather told my teacher.
อย่างที่อ้อยบอกว่ารุ่นอ้อยเนี่ยไม่ใช่อ้อยคนเดียวหรอกเพื่อนๆที่อยู่ในวัยเดียวกันเนี่ยเรามองดูเรื่องเพศศึกษาเป็นแบบมันเป็นเรื่องที่แบบอยู่ลึกๆไม่ควรจะเอามาคุยกันข้างนอกอย่างเงี้ยค่ะไม่ควรเอามาคุย
Que mi primera menstruación fue tan yo no estaba preparada para nada, o sea mi mamá no me había contado de nada, entonces de alguna manera la educación sexual tuvo que venir rápidamente y en esos tiempos, claro, no se hablaba mucho.
La educación sexual se abren muchas más posibilidades de poder relacionarse con las personas. Y yo creo que para mí tiene un valor importante el concepto porque también es importante de alguna manera valorarse como ser humano.
I just think it needs to be inclusive, honest and fun.
ก็น่าจะช่วยแก้ปัญหาเรื่องพวกเรื่องที่มันมีปัญหาตอนนี้ก็น่าจะเป็นแบบพวกท้องก่อนวัยอันควรอะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะเพราะว่าถ้าเราศึกษามาเราก็จะได้รู้ว่าต่อไปเราควรทำอะไรเราควรป้องกันยังไงอะไรคือสิ่งที่เราควรทำไม่ควรทำค่ะ
I can decide for myself when I want to have children. I can decide for myself when to get married, what love is for me, and all of those things. So really, for me, it's freedom.
Some parents feel shy talking about it with their children in the home. So if a child goes to school and he or she is educated on sex and all that, it's very good. You know, it helps them know their morals, how they should be respected, what to do.
ตอนนี้มันไม่ใช่เรื่องน่าอายแล้วเราก็ควรจะศึกษาไว้อะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะเพราะว่าเราก็ต้องอยู่ด้วยกันในสังคมนี้ก็น่าจะศึกษาไว้
And there's positive aspects of it like intimacy, forming a strong relationship with your partner and love essentially. I feel like it's important that everyone gets taught the positives as well as the negatives and risks of it.
Yo creo que en la medida en que la sexualidad se educa como algo natural, va a hacer que las personas nos vinculemos de otra manera y por lo tanto podamos, por un lado, aumentar las relaciones afectuosas y por lo tanto el respeto hacia las personas.
Comprehensive sexuality education, when given to any group of people, any person, it gives you a foundation for a successful life.